Hey, what's up? This is Dave Mira, and you're listening to The Expansion Project.
Welcome back to another episode of The Expansion Project. I am your host, Fat Tony, and on this show I have casual yet deep conversations with professional athletes, entrepreneurs, authors, bloggers, musicians, investors, and other successful people in hopes of expanding my mind and yours while motivating and inspiring people along the way. My guest today is very special and dear to my heart. He is somebody that I consider to be my personal financial mentor, and his name is Jim Matush. If you've ever wished you could just sit down with an older, wiser man and richer man and just listen to him talk about money and life, then this episode is definitely for you, because that is exactly what we did here. So a little bit of Jim's background. After his son died at the age of 15 in a rock climbing accident, he started up a nonprofit organization that ended up merging with the company or an organization called The Bridge. And that place is exactly where JoMoPro took place. So if there's any BMX riders listening out there, you have a little bit of connection to Jim Matush as well. Jim is a traveler and an adventurer. He does hang gliding and paragliding and scuba diving and skiing, and he just loves to experience the world on a high adrenaline level. He also has a mansion right outside St. Louis overlooking the river. It's got a gazebo, a tennis court, a swimming pool, and it's actually on the National Register of Historic Places. He is a very wealthy guy. He was a founding partner in a company called Trinity Wealth Advisors that he started in 1997. I believe their base client has a net worth of $5 million or more, so he deals with some high rollers in the St. Louis area. And actually, I didn't know this about him, but I read his bio on his website, and from 1992 to 1996, he actually hosted a weekly radio program called More Money with Matush. Unfortunately, I didn't have time today to ask him about that, but that's a pretty cool fact about him. Jim is also very active in his local community and church, and he is a dedicated husband and father. His daughter is actually one of my closest friends, and hopefully I'll have her on the show someday. On this episode, Jim drops knowledge, wisdom, and inspiration all about money and how it relates to our lives. I got to talk to him about the business of his wealth advisory company, and I got to ask him what he thinks about the old cliche of money is the root of all evil. But most of all, what we ended up talking about was finding a balance in your life and a direction for your life and learning to be generous. Jim is a very busy man, and he only had about an hour to talk today. I actually had to go through his assistant to schedule in this 1 hour time block. So by the time we got Skype set up and got the call rolling, we only had about 50 minutes or so to talk. So I didn't get to nearly all the things that I wanted to ask him about. But the time that we did spend is just absolutely packed with valuable content. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. So sit back and here we go with the Jim Matush interview. Before I jump on Skype, I want to thank all you guys for the great feedback. It keeps rolling in, and I am constantly appreciative of that. So thank you for all the great feedback. Please subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher so that you don't miss any episodes. While you're at it, go ahead and click on iTunes and give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review. After I get some more good reviews in, I'll keep reading them on the show and give you guys a shout out to whoever left the review. And of course, I would love for you all to tell a friend about the show. The more people you tell and get the word out there too, the more people are going to expand their minds and get motivated and inspired. Also, you guys can go to theexpansionprojectpodcast.com. When you go there, there's going to be a link and resources on all the different episodes. So if I ever talk about a particular book or a website or any other kind of resource on the show, you can go to the show's website and I'll have links to all that there for you, so you don't have to try to write down notes or anything as we're talking. On the website, on the right-hand side, there's a couple of banners. One of them is for NutraSumma. That is a company that I get protein and supplements from. They have a delicious vegan-friendly pea protein that I take, as well as some amino acids and creatine to help me with my strength building and recovery after my CrossFit workouts. And they are offering 20% off of their products at NutraSumma.com. That's NutraSumma.com. Use the promo code FATTONY1 and you'll get 20% off. There's a couple other links over there for Chef Kate's Nut Butter. She's going to give you 15% off with the coupon code FAT15 on chefkates.com. And there's a link to Amazon. Click that link, bookmark it, use it whenever you buy stuff. And when you do buy things, it's not going to cost you anything extra, but Amazon will kick back a few bucks here to the show, so that'll help me out. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce my guest, Jim Matush. Thank you so much for penciling me in and jumping on Skype with me here today.
Thad, it's a pleasure to be here with you. It's been a number of years, and I look forward to kind of sharing some wisdom.
Awesome. So let's get the background out of the way. I want to tell a quick story to the listeners about how we got connected. So your daughter, Lindsay Matush, worked for The Bridge, which is the company that put on JoMoPro. So any BMX listeners out there know of the JoMoPro contest. And one day I was sitting with Lindsay at actually the Nora Cup party, and we got to talking, and I was telling her about how I was recently really interested in kind of financial freedom and learning about personal finance and stuff. And right away she was like, "Oh, you should talk to my dad. He's a wealth advisor." And my ears perked up, and I was like, "What, really?" Like I've been wanting to try to find, a wealth type person that I could just bounce ideas off of and learn from and stuff. So she suggested I connect with you. And I remember the very first phone call I had with you, I was in Louisiana visiting my family for Christmas, and whatever the scheduling was, I actually had to pull into a parking lot of a shopping mall, and I sat there in my car on the phone for about an hour or so with this little black notebook, just taking notes and just hanging off of your every word. So that was kind of my first memory of getting connected with you. And then shortly after that, the next year, I actually flew into your hometown, St. Louis, and rode with you to the JoMoPro contest just so I could pick your brain and stuff. So I was kind of curious what your first memories are of how we got connected, and if you remember anything about sort of that first day that we spoke or anything.
Well, I do, because Lindsay hit me up and said, "Dad, I've got a friend that I want you to help." And I was like, "Oh, how do you want me to help him?" And she said, "He's really interested in wealth and how to accumulate money. He has these real significant goals that he wants to achieve, and money's kind of at the center of it." And I said, "Well, Lindsay, are you looking at this from a client perspective or as a personal friend perspective?" And she said, "Dad, this is a young guy that I'd really like you to mentor, and I want you to do this as a favor for me." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So that was kind of like I'm doing something for my daughter. And then my first memory of you was that you were intensely intentional about what you wanted to do. And that's very rare. Most of my client range starts in average between people at the age between 55 and 70. And they're people that typically have accumulated wealth or are on track to do so. And life has a series of events that get you to a certain point. And then it's all about making sense of what you've been blessed with and how do I steward what I've been given. So I'm not usually working with someone like yourself and who's like, I have this intense goal I want to get to, and that goal was, as I recall, I want to be a millionaire by the time that I'm 25 or something like that. How old were you then, Pat?
Yeah, that was probably, I was about 25. I probably said by the time I was 30, which I'm 32 now, and I haven't hit it yet, but that's all right. I'm on my way.
Your way. See, the particular goals are not important other than you have goals. And what struck me was from a young guy, 25 years old, has these goals. Now, the first thing I do is help people make sure they're realistic. And you may remember some of the conversations that we've had there. But in any event, what struck me was, okay, I'm doing a favor for my daughter. This is not a paying client. And when I talked with you, I personally, if you want to get my side of the story, it was more about how to bring balance to your life, because I work with a lot of people that by the time they're 55, they come to me and they say, all my life I have wanted to get to this certain point. And now I don't know if I'm there. I don't know if I'm not there. But how do I enjoy it? And really what we deal with is a lot about creating balance in life. And so I thought, Fat's at the early stage of this process, and what can I do to help him kind of not only achieve that goal? Because one of the things that you'll find, and maybe we'll talk about, is the specific goal is unimportant. It's a direction, it's a purpose, it's a path. It's a journey, and life has its ups and downs along the way. And being able to enjoy that and do well at it is really the key.
Yeah, so I think sort of that direction you were helping give and sort of setting realistic goals. I definitely had goals of, wanting to be a millionaire and, wanting to travel to the Maldives and get Ferraris and stuff like that, which I don't think are bad goals. And I still kind of have some of those goals. But it's funny because I think, I did end up finding some of that balance in a sense where over the last couple of years, I found myself in a position where I was sort of taking a step back and looking at my life. And I was like, you know what? I haven't gone to the Maldives yet and stayed in a $20,000 a night bungalow over the water, and I don't have a Ferrari yet, and I don't have a big house yet, but I do have a condo that I bought that's 3 blocks from the beach in a really cool city. I've got, a 2002 Mercedes that's paid off, and it's a pretty cool little car, and I've traveled to 35 countries and really had some incredible adventures. And so even though the quote unquote goal wasn't met, I was still like, damn, this is a pretty cool life that I've designed for myself, And you're right, the goal didn't matter, and I had kind of achieved some of that balance and some of that satisfaction that I was striving for, because the purpose of those goals was to have a cool car and have a cool house and to be able to travel the world. And I noticed that I was doing that already, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm kind of already there, even though I'm not there,
In fact, where I'm helping people at that beginning is what are really realistic goals. For example, I want to be a millionaire, which the truth of $1 million is it means absolutely nothing. It's a number on a piece of paper. As you now know, as you've accumulated money and you've reached certain goals, but it shows a path and a progress towards a direction. The more appropriate, realistic goal is I'd like to be financially independent, or have a net worth that can sustain me in a lifestyle that I want. And, the average doctor 10 years ago would come to me and say, I want to have $1 million so I can put it in 10% municipal bonds and live off $100,000 a year. Obviously, interest rates have come way down. You don't get 10% tax-free so none of that original goal of $1 million, there's no magic to that. In fact, those doctors today, at 10 years down the road, go, "Oh my gosh, $1 million is nothing," because I can only get 3% tax free. The bottom line is a more realistic goal that fits your nature. For example, what you're saying is staying in a bungalow that's a $20,000. See, you appreciate money and hanging on to it much more than blowing 20 grand on a one night stand, so coming into perspective, and that's really common for a 25-year-old, what money looks like through the eyes of a 25-year-old, and you're far from average, but through a typical young person is very different from an older person. And dealing with that change, kind of accepting that, growing with it, is what helps you get where you're going, which is this whole journey and path that we started talking about and we're still talking about today.
Yeah, all these years later. Yeah, that was, I guess it's been about 7.5 years now. So one of the first things that you said kind of during that conversation was if you want to, get on a path to accumulating wealth, you needed to start tracking your net worth. And so that was January 2008. So I guess we had our first conversation probably December 2007. So January 2008, I tracked my net worth for the first time, and it was just over $14,000. And and now April 2015, it's as of April last month, it was just over 275,000. So again, it's far from some of the big goals that I have in life, but you were right. Being able to see on the spreadsheet where I've come from and where I'm going and how much I've increased and where the money lies within my different investment vehicles and stuff. That was a huge help. So another really, really impactful thing that you said to me, and I think you just said it on the spot. You probably don't even remember saying it, but you were out here in California, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, and we went snorkeling outside of your hotel at the Montage Resort in Laguna Beach. You were out here for some kind of a conference or get-together, a mastermind group, so to speak. And we had dinner afterwards, and at some point, I think it was during dinner, you told me something along the lines of, "You'll never be an employee again." And this was kind of when I was trying to, transition out of working in BMX a lot and trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And, I had a lot of project ideas bouncing around in my head. And he said something to that extent of, you'll never be an employee again. And, man, I got to tell you, that was really, really powerful and impactful. And just knowing that somebody as successful as yourself believed in me and believed in my vision and my direction just really gave me confidence and reassurance kind of on this path that I'm on in life.
Yeah, there's two kinds of people: employees, which is probably 80% of folks in America. They're working for someone, and employers, people that are working for themselves at least, or have other people working for them. And there's no right or wrong, good or bad about it. But when you plug into what your comfort level, what you're made for, who you were designed to be, then that's the reason that fit for you, that resounded, was it was kind of like an awakening of, oh, yeah, I don't need to work for the man or this company. Or, for example, I remember very clearly some of your early goals as a much younger guy where you wanted to work for BMX Magazine. Mm-hmm. And you got that. So you're a very goal-oriented, we all are as people. We need to have these goals. My point is the goals need to change, and then you figure out values along the way, which this particular value was, oh, I'm never going to work for someone else. I'm going to work for myself. Your net worth is higher than you think because you have a business, and you haven't figured out how to look at what the capitalization of that business is, what its value is. But over time, what you will, today, I've been 34 years in this business, and my value, you can capitalize the income stream, and I could sell this business for several $1 million. So that's a part of my net worth that I know, only because I've been at it for a while and built that you will get to. I have no doubt that Fat Tony Enterprises, and that's what I meant by saying you won't work for anybody else. You will end up creating, and your mind is naturally entrepreneurial. Now, that's the way you were made, Fat. Mm-hmm. Everyone's not like that. As a matter of fact, it's fewer people than more. Most people want the security of a paycheck. They want to show up. They want to leave their work. You're just built. You're always thinking of ideas. Mm-hmm. When you're traveling and you fashioned a business around the things that you like to do. And for example, while you might not have gone and reached this goal of this particular place at a $20,000 a night, you have traveled around the world. You have been able to snorkel or scuba dive or, hike and do all of these things and get paid for it. So that combination of putting those things together is a more realistic goal. It fits. It's more congruous. And now do you see why, as your life gets more and more complicated, as you have more and more pieces and parts of the picture, that's the value that we bring to the table for clients, is helping them put that in perspective, because it doesn't get any easier the more parts and moving pieces you have.
Yeah. So I don't want to make this whole conversation about me by any means. But before we move on, I would like to know, what is it in me or anybody else that you kind of take on as a pupil, so to speak, that makes you confident in me and makes you keep willing to help somebody like me out?
Well, from my own perspective, I've been at it long enough and done this. I've been, successful enough that I can pick and choose who I want to work with. And I can't do everything for all people. So the balance in my life enters into that spiritual side of things, where I go, okay, God, is there a purpose in me working with this person? And I get a very confirmed yes or a no with who I'm working with. I meet people all the time. On average, I probably meet anywhere from 2 to 10 people a week. That's just my part of the business. I love meeting people. I'm kind of built like that. And it's very few of those that I should work with. In you, there was something about that intense goal-oriented focus, that request from my daughter, that message from God that said, invest, spend time with this guy, and I enjoy it. Fat, you and I have a relationship where we can go snorkeling off of, the Montage and outside of LA. That's a cool thing. And we'll do other things. And that's all part of what I call kind of a purpose-driven life. It's not that I make money from you. I don't need to. There's a value that goes beyond just the dollars and cents. And that's, I guess, the longer answer to how and who I work with. We probably today, we don't pick up more than, we work with 100 clients and we pick up about maybe 10 a year. And it's where there's this intense connection that says we can make a difference in their life. And I wouldn't work with you, Faith. I wouldn't work with you, Fat, if I didn't feel like I was making a difference in your life. And I don't think you would keep coming back to me unless you felt like there was some difference being made. And that's kind of transcending above the economics of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So, I'm sure I've said it many times and I'll say it many more times, but again, thank you for everything that you've done for me and will continue to do for me. I really, really do appreciate it, and it absolutely does make a difference in my life. So with that said, I remember in our early conversations, you did tell me that you had some kind of a financial mentor along the way that, sort of told you that he would mentor you if you sort of passed along that type of thing to another person. So can you briefly tell me about that relationship with your personal mentor and maybe how you sort of got into that relationship with him?
Well, I've had several along the way, and they've each built. My grandfather was my first mentor. That was someone I looked up to. He was a very overpowering, very successful German man, larger than life, and someone that I got my early childhood values from. My parents helped shape that. My mom always believed that I could do whatever I set my mind to, which is a very scary thing to put inside a creative young kid's mind. But the particular mentor that I probably mentioned to you, and I think you're talking about, was in college. I had a guy, I went to school at Texas A&M, and a guy came alongside of me that we were at the mountains on a ski slope, and he saw that I was kind of an outgoing, gregarious guy, as was he, and we struck up this friendship. It just happens to turn out what I call a God thing, where he had a lake home about 90 minutes away from where I went to college. And at the end of that ski trip, he said, come down and visit me and bring your girlfriend. And well, that sounded like fun. And over a couple of years, what started as just a friendship, someone that I met on a ski trip, turned into something where I felt very indebted to him. He was always doing things for me, from allowing me a beautiful place on a lake to go. And when I had no money, I was a student, it was like, whoa, what's this? And we'd play on a sailboat in the lake, and go out and ski on his power boat, and we'd sit out and count the satellites on his deck and watching the sky and talking about life and all of the end of that story comes with me saying, how can I ever repay you? You've given me all of these things that have really, blessed me in a lot of ways. And he said, let me tell you my story. And his story, he was a Mexican guy, this is in Texas, who had come over illegally with his mother, and a judge took his mother in as his housekeeper, and then took him in under his wing as kind of a mentor relationship. This guy, his name was Hank Gomez, Hoss they called him, hell on skis. When I met him, I was 19 years old. He was 60. His wife called him her 60-year-old teenager. And the fun of this guy was someone who retired from the military as a colonel at the age of 55. And I'm now meeting him 5 years later. And his job in life, his focus was to keep his social calendar full. And I was part of that. And he said, you know, someone helped me, took me under my wing when I was an illegal immigrant and kind of helped make my way to eventually I was able to get into the U.S. Army and become a colonel, retire. He married a colonel, so both of them had great incomes and could enjoy the world in a way that just enabled them with an ongoing income. He lived within his means. He had all kinds of fun toys and stuff that he thought sharing them with me was an opportunity to not only enjoy them, but plant a seed in me that someday my way of paying him back was to turn around and pay it forward, so to speak, with someone else. So, Fat, in many ways, you're like who I was for him. And what you find out is, what he would tell me all the time is, you're doing so much more for me than I'm doing for you. And I'd go, what? You're kidding me. I'm coming down here. I'm enjoying, wine and booze and lake house and my girlfriends and all of this. And that thrilled his heart to share that life with me and create a new perspective and nurture the seed that was growing in me. And I never realized that at the time. I thought it was a one-way street, much like you may think about me. And now I get very fully, because I do that with a number of people, and it's all from my perspective, this God thing of going, these are people that you should return the favor to. And there's a whole richness and quality of life that comes out of it that's probably worthy of another show.
Okay. Very cool. That's a cool story. Thanks for sharing that. So where or when did you actually start making and accumulating your money and wealth?
Well, my personal story starts at the age of 15. I took over my parents' educational fund. I was the oldest of 4 kids, and they had set aside money with their stockbroker in stodgy, old blue chip American companies, AT&T and Ford and GM. And at the age of 15, I'd always been kind of interested in money and kind of said, we can do better than this. Because I'd look at my account. They were at a fairly early age, open to me being aware of the financial picture. I had an interest in it. And the short end of that story is I ended up, with the broker's help, figuring out, South African gold stocks, so this is an eclectic thing, and this was back when gold was $7 an ounce. It was, and I happened to have been extremely lucky or blessed, or however you want to call that, depending on your view of luck. And it took off. In short order, in about 2 years, it was worth 4 times what my sister's accounts were. So it had grown dramatically. Now, just to show you that it wasn't genius on my part, it got cut in half before I decided to get out of it. So the greed side of learning about money was a very important lesson. I had watched this little $30,000 account grow to $100,000 and then get cut back down to about $60,000 and just was heartbroken. Of course, it was way ahead of where my sisters were, and my parents thought I was a genius, and I was at the beginning of learning, wow, there's a lot more to this than I really understand. From there, I ended up going into school. I ultimately ended up with an MBA in finance and marketing. I had a short stay in real estate, as you're now kind of understanding that. I owned a 6-unit apartment building, and that did real well while I was 2 years in grad school, so I was able to live off of 5 other rents and afford the building. It doubled in value, and so I've always been kind of leaning towards Making money is somewhat of a game. It's something that if you work at, if you look at, if you study, you can get good at anything. I'm not particularly good at football. I'm not particularly good at a lot of other things, sports, things that people like. But I've learned how to play good at the game of money. And that was the beginning. I got married in '82. The money thing, when I got out of grad school, the thing that drew me in and started for me in 1981 was a business in financial planning, which in that day and time, no one had ever heard of. So all your listeners will go, well, everybody does financial planning. And that's the problem that's happened over the last 30 years. Every banker, every accountant today, every stockbroker, there's a lot of people selling something. And not that that's wrong, but there's a promotion of something with a vested bias that's a little dangerous. And over the 30 years, because I was successful in it and kind of building this particular business, it ended up kind of catering towards the higher end of the net worth and people that could afford to not be sold something like a product, but have an advisory relationship. They pay me a fee to make sure that they're not stepping into potholes or making mistakes that most people make. And that's the value you have, is not falling into some of those insurance traps or brokerage traps where, the person may believe in it, may be a good product, but it may not be a good fit for what you need because of the cost, the commissions, the economic incentive behind it.
Yeah, so you just said, use the term financial advisor, and your company touts itself as wealth. Or I'm sorry, you were talking about a planner, and you guys are more of an advisor and a coach. So can you kind of tell me the difference in that and why that's important to your company?
Well, here's the difference. It's all a lot of similar words: planning, advising, management, wealth management. The way we describe it is wealth management is made up of three important parts. There's investment consulting, which if you look at it, whether you're working at Vanguard or whether you're working with a stockbroker or whether you're working with a registered investment advisor, someone that's giving you advice, but the whole way that you manage your money is something that people make a fee from. And that's what we call investment consulting. People come to us they never trust any one of those people individually, typically. They might have 3 or 4 people doing it. They're doing it 3 or 4 different ways. And you, the consumer, scratches your head and goes, I don't trust any of these, so I don't want to give them all of my money, but I don't want all my money in one basket. So how we look at that is say there's a variety of ways to do it. We don't have the perfect way. We look at all ways to manage money, and we'll tell you the pros and cons of them, and then put a picture together that makes sense, reduces costs, saves you money, and makes sure that you're getting performance on the other side of it so that you're going to continue growing. That's why I told you to create that net worth map so you could see, am I progressing down the road? When you are looking at it on a quarterly basis, which is what we do, you can see and compare it to some kind of benchmark and say, am I moving ahead or not? So that's the first piece of wealth management. The second piece of wealth management is called advanced planning. So in today's complex world, let me pick taxes as one piece of it. Your biggest enemy, and one fact that you've done real well by business and investment source, your real estate. But for most people that have money, it becomes increasingly difficult to keep Uncle Sam out of taking more and more of it. And not that you shouldn't give your fair share by any stretch of the imagination, but most people that have a simple, straight salary or what have you end up with a lot of taxable income. And tax rates can be exorbitant, especially where you live out in California. You've not only got federal taxes, but you've got state taxes on top of that. So it's real hard to the secret of wealth accumulation is kind of like, it's not how much I make, it's how much I hang on to that really matters. So in this advanced planning realm, we call something wealth enhancement, where you're actually looking at, how do I enjoy my money? How do I hang on to more of it? How do I save it? Another area of advanced planning is called risk protection. That gets into the insurances that you have. You have insurance on your home. You have insurance on your house. If you're married, you have insurance on your life because you're protecting the ability to drive an income. You might have disability. You have health insurance. So you have all these insurances, and what is the right kind? If you buy it from an insurance salesman, then he's going to sell you insurance. And it's undoubtedly the best thing for him. Is it the best thing for you? Well, an advisor kind of overcomes that compensation issue. You then get into, once you have money, there's wealth transfer. You've built a net worth that may be several $1 million, and how do I make sure if something happens to me, it goes to whom I want? You know my story with my son dying at the age of 15, and we've kind of accumulated a lot of assets. Well, in my situation, my daughter doesn't get, I have a daughter and a son, my son died. I have half of our money going to this foundation because I believe generosity is a huge value, that once you learn to give, you've done much more than just accumulate. That comes back to that balance. But these are all advanced planning issues that we work in and help people with kind of coordinating around what their life purpose is. The last part of wealth management is relationship management. And that gets into not only, typically there's a husband and a wife and getting on the same page, which, believe it or not, is a very difficult thing for people to do. If you know how difficult it is for yourself, imagine two different people. Then you get into the advisor, the bevy of advisors that people have, from accountants to attorneys to investment people, insurance people, all of those people, kind of keeping them all on the same page. So that's what we call wealth management. It's obviously for people that can afford it. We have a minimum fee. We have a certain asset range that we work with, but that's typically because we're dealing with those more complex lives.
Awesome. I could listen to you talk about this kind of stuff all day. Unfortunately, you have to go in about 15 minutes. So I want to try to tackle some of the points that I wanted to bring up. Can you speak on the point of not being emotional about deals or money? You mentioned before how you were young and you were heartbroken when your investment chopped in half. So how can people learn to not be emotional about money?
Great lesson. So there's two powerful motivators that you want to be aware of: greed at one end of the spectrum and fear at the other end of the spectrum. And when either one of those is driving you, you're in that emotional world that's very dangerous. So, for example, in my South African gold company stock period, I got very greedy with seeing this money grow rapidly, and wanted it to keep growing. And for example, the price that I had bought into was about $30 a share, and it went up to $40 a share. And I was like, oh, wow, this is great. And then it hit $50 a share. It happened to be associated with the run-up in gold. It didn't have anything to do with this company. Well, I didn't understand that. What I just saw was the price. So I said, to the broker, when it hits 60, I'm going to sell it. Well, it went right through 60, and when it hit 60, the broker called me, and I said, no, when it hits 70, I'm going to sell it. And then it hit 80. When it hits 80, when it hits 90, when it hit 90, I said, when it hits 100, it went up to 100. And then it started down. And I started going, then it was fear as the motivator for me. Well, I will sell it when it gets back up to 100. Started going down. Went down into the 90s, then the 80s. And then before long I said, well, when it gets to back up to 90, I'll sell it. I ended up selling at about 65. So, I had more than doubled the money that I had started with in a relatively short period of time. But it was a huge lesson of not letting that emotion of greed making, I didn't really, in retrospect, what I would do is look at what's making this company go up. It's the price of gold. If I could have very astutely said, I'm in South African gold stocks because they produce gold, and gold is on a trend line going up, that's when it's not at a certain price. As long as the trend is going up, then I'm in it. When it starts going down, then I want to get out of it. And that's not an easy thing to do. You need experts truly to do a good job of that. Today, people's interest in gold is a joke. It's at all-time highs. When you hear it on the radio, that's another emotional tie-in. People get, they're moved by emotion, fear. Why are they buying gold? It's at an all-time high. Look at how much money you've made. So I don't know if that's coming across well, but if that motivation is moved by how much money I could have made or how much so-and-so did make, the truth is that's in the past, that's gone. Do you think it's going to double again? Do you think gold going from 600 to 1200, now I buy it thinking it's going to go from 1200 to 2400? Now there are times, when you look at economic collapse, when you look at war, when you look, it's a good time to be in gold, but look at that trend behind it and follow that trend to get out of the emotional tie-in. The other thing that scares people, the end, the craziness of what's going on in the world, the government printing money. You can get too fear motivated and afraid of everything. So
is there
ends of the spectrum are dangerous.
So is there a way or any kind of advice you could give to people on how to sort of work on their mindset to not be motivated by these fears or greed or emotions? Is there steps you can take to retrain your mind to not be emotional about money?
Yes, and I'm going to use a little of what we've done recently together. So you'll remember I told you instead of buying stocks or bonds individually, which you tried for a while, because I can follow this company. I know this company that I like, Apple or whatever the company is, and I said turn it over to a professional who decides when to get in and when to get out of it. Now I still want to be aware of the market. A rising market brings up all ships. A falling market brings down all, so the economy, the outlook right now is pretty good. So go into it, but let the manager, the professional fund manager, look at, what are the best companies to be in? And they take that emotional decision-making away from you. And you don't have to decide, do I get in now or get out now? So that's one way of shifting it from you to a professional. Today there are more professionals, more money managers out there than stocks or bonds to buy. So with computers, and some of what I showed you, a month or two ago, was looking at, if I feel so-and-so about the market today, relatively optimistic, yet I want some downside protection, I can look at track record. Now that's past, but look at how did the money manager do in good times, and then how did he do in bad times, and use that as a rationale for who I want to manage my money. When it gets more cloudy about the future, when things are more suspicious, when things are beginning to get scary, then you focus on the people that do real well when the market's going down. So does that answer?
Yeah, very cool. So there's an old cliche that I have a personal problem with that I would like to get your opinion on it. The cliche of money is the root of all evil. And I'll preface this and kind of give my opinion, but I'd love to know your opinion. And my opinion comes partly from a book that I read that had a big impact on me called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, which I've talked about many times, posted about it on my blog and stuff. And in this book, they talk about how cliches like that, if you think money is the root of all evil, or that, rich people are greedy and those types of negative thoughts about money, then subconsciously you will never allow yourself to become rich or wealthy, because your subconscious mind will never allow yourself to become something that you view as negative, whether that be evil or greedy or whatever. So I absolutely don't agree with that statement at all. And I know some of the nicest people I know, yourself included, are, wealthy people. So what is your take on that kind of cliche of, rich people are greedy or money is the root of all evil?
Well, you're exactly right. And that book is very helpful. Let me tell you where that all comes from. There's a biblical verse that talks about the love of money is the root of all evil. The Bible actually has more scripture talking about money, over 2,000 verses, than it does about prayer. So that money is an easy thing to fall prey to. And it's not money, it's the love of money. So when you get to a great example of that most people relate to is Scrooge, the movie Scrooge. That guy couldn't enjoy any of his money. He was all about accumulating it. Why? He was old. He wasn't going to be able to enjoy it. And into his life comes this employee that, he befriends over time. And that's the whole point and it's very important that subconsciously you get that, because if you don't, it will block you. Many people have an experience in life where their parents or other people modeled terrible things with money. They were greedy. They were driven. They ruined families because they were more interested in money than they were their family. Many successful business people have the struggle of, I'm good at money, I'm not good at family. It's because they're out of balance. That's why I was real called, so to speak, to work with you. Because I don't want you to get just all focused on where money's going to take you. There's a lot more important things than that, and have balance in it. So that is a very important concept, to be well-grounded and well-balanced in. I've not had money in life, come from nothing to having money in life, and I would tell you it's a lot better to have money. But the secret to being able to enjoy it comes from something I mentioned earlier, generosity. When you can learn how to give away, think of what that does in your mind. It's automatically kicking you into an abundance mentality where I have enough to actually give it away. Now, do I give away everything? No. And as a matter of fact, giving away money can create entitlement and enablement, which is one of the biggest problems we have today in America. So that I'm not saying do that. I'm just saying to avoid that greed mentality, that danger side of money, which is termed the love of money. There are ways of getting out of that, and that ends up for most people being generous with money and helping, finding causes that you're called to.
So, what kind of generosity do you see with your own money, and what kind of causes do you like to donate to, and what sort of do you get out of that personally?
So what's happened for me is I've reached those, when I was 25, I had the same ambitions like you. That's part of why it was like, oh, I can relate to Fat. I thought money was everything, being successful. I had done well with this educational fund. I'd gotten great success vibe out of that. And if you look at my life through till I was about 40, it was all about chasing money. In fact, in 1981, when I graduated, the average MBA was making $25,000 a year. And I was convinced if I made $100,000, that was the answer. And it took me 2 years to build this business where I could make $100,000 in a year. And I can remember going into a depression. And the manager of the company I worked with at that time came to me and he said, "What's wrong with you, Jim?" And it was about August of that year that I first made $100,000. And it was like very, who knows? I'm the only one that knows, or me and my wife. And who are you sharing that with? You know, there's no happiness in making $100,000. What that manager did for me, which I don't blame him for, but was he realized, oh, I was off track. And he said, "Jim, you're thinking about the small dogs. Making $100,000, making $250,000 is the trick." And it forced me into this cycle of chasing money. Before you know it, 10 years later, I was thinking making $1 million was, in a year was the way to success. And I can tell you I've done that, and there's no great success in that. There's no happiness in that. That's why that balance is so important. So what do I support and give? I have a designated formula that I give to. There are great tax advantages to this, so I do it in a smart, advanced planning way, putting the tax code on my side. And there are particular causes that touch me very deeply. Making a difference in people's lives is one of those. I've now realized money isn't the answer to everything. For me, there's a higher power. There is a God. And connecting people with that makes a lot more sense. It actually has eternal rewards. So there's something bigger. Those are the kinds of things that I like to support. So I give away quite a bit of money each year. It's a percentage. It's a small percentage. I still accumulate money, and I still play the money game of having it grow. But I get much more satisfaction, enjoyment, and just incredible purpose in life out of what I give. When my son died, that whole youth center that we first met you about was all about creating a place for young kids to hang out and staffing it with people that really took a greater interest in kids' lives, mostly because parents didn't have the time, and kids don't trust their parents when they're becoming independent. That's, again, another whole story. But these are passions that my life evolved around because of what happened. My son dying, for many people, is something they would never talk about. In my life, it turned out to be not something that I wouldn't change, but that happened, and it has incredibly changed my life for the better. Who I am and what I do and what I support is very much moved by that year, that very tragic and difficult year in my life that has brought more joy in the long run than one could ever imagine. And connecting into that is kind of what I like to support.
That's great. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you have to leave in just a few minutes. Can we end this with, do you have a favorite quote or maybe a favorite piece of advice that someone's given you? Or I'll even open it up just because this is a little bit of a unique situation. If you want to give advice to me going forward or anybody listening, maybe you can end with that as well.
Well, I have a lot of them. So I'll throw out, I've already mentioned it's not how much you make that matters. It's how much you hang on to. Mm-hmm. A second thing I would tell you is there is no particular dollar goal. Forget that. It's a place in life that you want to reach. Mm. It's financial independence over the $1 million. Mm-hmm. Fat, you are much closer to that than you know because you've created a lifestyle around what you do. Mm-hmm. So it actually pays you to do things that you love. If you don't like what you're doing, you're in the wrong place. You weren't created. You weren't made to do something you hate to do and you complain your way through life around. Do something you love and the money will follow. You know that clearly. We've talked about that many times. The last thing that I would end up with, because I've talked about it quite a bit, is learning the joy of giving, generosity. It's typically something that people don't get to until they're too old and they're frustrated because they see much more of their life behind them than ahead of them. And what I'll tell you is that can be an incredible motivator. Generosity, giving, helping others. Pat, you've been to Africa. You've seen, my daughter Lindsay. You've seen some things that you've poured your heart and soul into, and you've felt that intangible joy, even in some sad circumstances where people that have nothing have more joy and satisfaction in life. Not that they don't want stuff. We're always built to want. I want more. I want to accumulate more money. Do I need it? That's arguable. I have all that I really need. And what do I do with it is really a great place to end with that. When we die, we're not going to get to wherever we get to, depending on what you believe, and someone go, you didn't make enough money. You didn't save enough money. It's going to be more like, here's what you were given. What did you do with it? And when you connect into that, you can define and really enjoy your purpose in life. And it's not related to how much dollars and cents you have. It's far more related to what you're doing in life.
Man, I'm sitting over here smiling big. I wish people could see the video right now, because I'm just sitting here like a little kid, just, with puppy dog eyes looking up at my big brother, just in awe. You're very inspiring, Jim, and super knowledgeable, and I just really, really appreciate you not only giving me this wisdom and knowledge and passing this on to me, but everybody else that will be able to hear this. It means the world to me, and I know you have to leave, so we're going to end there, and I just want to say thank you again for everything.
All righty, Pat. Enjoyed it as always, and know you're doing as much for me as I'm doing for you.
Love it. All right, talk to you soon. Take care.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye.